Good morning, Dan and Amy. So I want to remind people, too, that we do have state and local elections on November 8th in Illinois.
Yes, we know that.
Well, I mean,
you aware of that?
Sometimes people forget. I find it difficult to believe they could forget with the amount of advertisements and mail they're probably receiving. But we focus so much time on the presidential race, and we should. But your state government, your local government, that probably has a more consistent, direct impact on your quality of life than the federal government. Although, if it's end of days with Hillary Clinton, perhaps you could argue that. So state elections, a statewide constitutional office election for Illinois comptroller on the ballot. This is a rarity. Normally, it's with all the other constitutional offices that would be up again in 2018. But because Leslie Munger was appointed after the untimely death of Judy Bart Topinka, the General Assembly, in its infinite wisdom, scheduled a 2-year an election within 2 years, and kind of the presidential cycle rather than the normal non-presidential cycle. And Leslie Munger, who we've had on the show before, Illinois State Comptroller, joins us now to make her closing argument. Comptroller Munger, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
So why don't we start with what the other side is doing, not just to you, but to kind of all the Republican candidates, this month-long barrage of ads from super PACs and and the Democrat Party, just directly, trying to link every Illinois Republican from Ronner on down to Donald Trump, and basically just say, every Republican is affiliated with Donald Trump, endorses everything Donald Trump has done, and if you vote Republican for any office, you're voting for Donald Trump. How do you respond to that?
Well, of course, that's their standard operating practice. They can't run on their own records. They've created, certainly in the state, which I can speak to, they've created the mess that we have here, 16 years of unbalanced budgets, pension holidays, all this underfunding. The mess that we have didn't happen overnight, and they don't want to talk about any of that. And so they try to link, all of us to something that is completely out of our control. And it's just, what they always do. So I hope people will look at really each of our own records is for all these races that are up, my record versus my opponent and all the others, when you go to vote, and look at who's actually trying to stand up for the taxpayers and the people of Illinois versus maintain their own political power in their careers.
I watched your debate on ABC7, and Susana Mendoza kept saying that, you were handpicked by Governor Ronner and that you don't challenge, that you go along to get along. And actually, that's not true. And I want you to tell our listeners how you have not given everything that Governor Ronner has wanted you to do.
Well, Amy, within a couple of weks after he appointed me to office, I had to stand up to him and when he asked me to withhold fair share union dues from employee paychecks who are not in the union, I could not do that legally. I would have been violating my oath, and so I had to tell him no, and I took a lot of heat for that actually at the time. I've also stood up to the Attorney General when she sued me to stop paying state employees when we started our new year without a budget. State employees are paid today because I went to court with my own lawyers and got an appeal and overruled her. I stood up to both sides of the aisle when I put all of the elected officer pay and legislative pay in line with the state's bills. They continue to call me and beat me up about that pretty much every day. And I actually had to go up against the governor again on some of the payments for human service organizations. We've had to work with their agencies to try and get certain things covered under some of the court orders that are out there that should have been paid that were not being covered. So, and I think it's important for people to know, I didn't know the governor other than just as a candidate before he appointed me to this role. I don't have some decades of, long friendship. I really just met him through being a candidate, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve our state. And
I want you to address one of the your opponent's ads that I've seen that I know is misleading, takes a soundbite of yours out of context because I know what the facts are, and we've also discussed it on this show. This is from an interview you gave on a radio station where you said, the ad has you saying essentially that you prioritize state legislators over human service agencies and nonprofits in terms of payment of unpaid bills or payment of salaries versus unpaid bills. Can you address that false claim in that ad?
Yes, thanks, Dan. This is just one of the many things where she has twisted and distorted the truth. It's kind of standard operating practice, I think, with her these days. But the quote was, I was explaining why I put our pay at the back of the line, why I put legislators and elected officers behind everyone else, because by not doing that, I would have been essentially prioritizing our own pay. And so what she did is she took the middle part out and eliminated the part that's actually why I did it. It was the motivation. It wasn't political. It was because we can't pay our bills. We need to prioritize people most in need. We need to free up every ounce of cash to make payments in very tight cash-constrained circumstances.
And this is why one of the reasons, especially in this climate, why the comptroller's office is so important, kind of relatively obscure office, probably in the minds of Illinoisans generally speaking, but it is much more profile than it's ever had for exactly this reason, all the challenges facing the state and, by extension, your office. And following up on that, just to put an exclamation point on your seriousness about what you just described, and that's the position you've taken, you've also proposed this idea of no budget, no pay on a go-forward basis. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the idea, everyone probably knows in our Constitution that we are required to have a budget that's balanced in Illinois, and we have not actually had a balanced budget passed by our legislature and governors since 2001 because there's no consequence if they don't do it, and we see the ramifications now. So no budget, no pay actually puts in place some teeth and some consequence into that requirement, and we will have to pass it through law. And if we can't get it through the legislature to be called for a vote, we're going to go via petition. And the idea is that you have through the legislative session, they can work to pass a balanced budget. If they fail to do so by the end of the legislative session and have it signed and ready to go, we stop paying them. All of the elected officials, myself included, in that we stop getting paid until we get the job done, and there's no retroactive pay. And it's been done in other places. It's actually done in California. And what a surprise. Legislators finally got their act together and started passing balanced budgets on a timely basis because it finally hits them in the pocketbook instead of everyone else.
So your Democratic challenger, Susana Mendoza, why isn't she ready to be Illinois comptroller? Why are you better for the position than she?
Well, my opponent claims that she is an independent, truth-telling fiscal watchdog. She's not independent. She has spent years working in lockstep with Speaker Madigan. She has voted for every one of his unbalanced budgets, every one of the pension holidays that he wanted passed. She voted to raise her own pay while not contributing to pensions. She's put herself first and her party first over and over again. And even when the state was drowning in $10 billion worth of bills, and we had to put in place the largest tax increase in our history, she was saying he's the leader we need for the future, and he is a great public servant. So she's not independent. She's not a truth teller. We've already seen how she's distorted my record, and she doesn't want to talk about how she's she's built two pensions on the public tax, on taxpayers, two publicly paid salaries. She distorts that record. I don't know if you saw that she had to be sued by Best Buy before she was ever in the Illinois House. It was information that came out a couple of days ago because she didn't pay her own bills. And then she came out and said she sued Best Buy. But I think when the sheriff shows up at your house with a summons, and you're the defendant, you're the one getting sued. And so she's lied about that, so she's not a truth teller. And then finally, she's not fiscally responsible. As I've already said, she's voted for all this. She's up to her eyeballs in the mess, and she's trying to blame her decade of doing this on me. And, I'll just remind everyone, I am new to government. I came from the private sector. I've had to balance budgets. I've tried to lead by example in this role, really cutting my own budget, initiating new projects and a new computer system for the state that will save our state $500 million annually when it's fully up and running. We did open a pilot just the beginning of October. I put my own pay and the legislative pay at the back of the line of the bills because human services should be paid first. I've prioritized those services, and I'm pushing no budget, no pay. I'm really here to stand up for taxpayers in the state, And if I'm unsuccessful, I go back to my nice life, not to my next political career. So I'm here for people of Illinois and put the state first. She's made it very clear she's there for herself and to put herself first.
And if she loses Mendoza, she goes back to designing the city sticker as city clerk. Big job. All right.
Yeah.
She is Illinois State Comptroller Leslie Munger. The website, Leslie, the campaign website?
VoteMunger.com.
VoteMunger.com. VoteMunger.com on Tuesday.
I'll
Leslie
be voting
Munger.
for.
Yeah, there you go. Leslie Munger,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on. Have a great day, Dan and Amy.
Thanks. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.